History is full of weapons that were meant to change the world. Machines designed not just to fight battles, but to decide wars. In the final years of World War II, as Germany faced collapse on all fronts, Nazi engineers placed their hopes on one last miracle, a tank so powerful, so advanced, and so secret that even many German soldiers didn't know it existed. It was meant to be unstoppable. It was meant to terrify the Allies. It was meant to rewrite the rules of armored warfare. But it never fired a single shot in real combat. Not because of enemy fire, not because of sabotage, not because of spies, but because Mother Nature herself stepped onto the battlefield and stopped all 13 of them before the war could even begin. This is the story of Germany's most ambitious secret tank, and how nature proved stronger than steel. By 1943, the German war machine was bleeding. The Eastern Front had become a nightmare of endless snow, mud, and death. At Stalingrad, an entire German army had vanished. In North Africa, the Afrika Korps was defeated, and in the skies above Germany, Allied bombers were reducing cities to ashes. Hitler refused to accept defeat. Instead, he demanded Wunderwaffen, wonder weapons that could reverse Germany's fate overnight. Jet fighters, ballistic missiles, super heavy tanks. The Führer believed technology would save the Reich. And so, behind closed doors, German engineers were ordered to create something the world had never seen before. This tank was not designed for speed. It was not designed for efficiency. It was designed for domination. Thick armor that no Allied gun could penetrate. A cannon capable of destroying enemy tanks from kilometers away. A presence so massive that its mere appearance would crush morale. The Germans called it a secret weapon. Official documents barely mentioned it. Factories working on it were hidden deep inside forests and underground facilities. Only 13 were ever completed, and each one was a monster. The tank weighed so much that it broke the limits of engineering. Bridges could not support it. Rail lines struggled to carry it. Even roads cracked beneath its weight. On paper, it was unbeatable. In reality, it was a prisoner of the earth itself. German planners imagined it rolling across battlefields, shrugging off enemy fire like rain. What they didn't fully understand was this. The battlefield is not a factory floor. As the first of the 13 secret tanks were moved for deployment, problems began immediately. Rain turned fields into oceans of mud. Snow froze engines solid overnight. Spring thaws swallowed entire vehicles. These tanks didn't charge into battle. They sank. Recovery vehicles couldn't pull them out. Towing cables snapped. Engines overheated and failed. Every kilometer forward became a battle against terrain. And terrain always won. On the Eastern Front, nature was already a proven killer. Russian winters had destroyed Napoleon's army. Now they were destroying Hitler's machines. Temperatures dropped so low that fuel thickened into jelly. Metal became brittle. Crew members suffered frostbite inside armored hulls. These tanks required perfect conditions that simply did not exist in wartime Europe. One by one, the 13 secret tanks became immobile. Not destroyed, not defeated. Neutralized by nature. Allied intelligence had rumors, whispers of a massive German tank, a beast too big to believe. But no Allied soldier ever faced all 13 in battle. Why? Because they never reached the front. Some broke down during transport. Others were abandoned when fuel shortages made them useless. A few were deliberately destroyed by German crews to prevent capture. The greatest irony of all? Germany's most powerful tank became its most useless. Inside these steel giants were trained crews, men, who believed they were assigned to a weapon that would turn the war. They waited. They trained. They dreamed of battle. Instead, they guarded broken machines in forests and muddy fields. No glory. No victories. Just silence, cold, and disappointment. Some crews never fired their main gun even once. Hitler continued to believe that if just one of these tanks reached the battlefield, everything would change. But war does not care about belief. It cares about reality. Fuel shortages, bombed factories, destroyed railways, and above all, weather. The same rain, snow, and mud that had stopped countless armies before now stopped. Germany's final secret. By 1945, Germany was collapsing. The tanks were no longer assets. They were burdens. Some were blown up by retreating forces. Others were captured intact and studied by the Allies. What they discovered shocked even them. The tanks were powerful but impractical. Over-engineered. Too complex. Too heavy. They represented ambition without restraint. These 13 tanks were never defeated by bullets or bombs. They were defeated by something older than war itself: nature. Mud does not fear armor. Snow does not care about ideology. Rain does not stop falling because a machine is expensive. The Germans built a tank to conquer the battlefield. But they forgot one truth. The battlefield belongs to nature first. The German engineers who designed this secret tank were not fools. They were some of the most brilliant minds of their generation. But brilliance under pressure can become blindness. As Allied forces closed, and from the West and the Soviet army crushed, everything from the East, time was running out. The engineers were ordered to ignore practicality and focus on power. More armor, bigger guns, heavier steel. No one was allowed to ask the most important question: where would this machine actually fight? This tank was closer to a moving fortress than a vehicle. Its armor was so thick that even the strongest Allied anti-tank shells would struggle to penetrate it head-on. The main gun could destroy enemy armor long before the enemy could even see it. On a firing range, it was terrifying. On blueprints, it was flawless. But war is not fought on blueprints. The engine strained constantly under the tank's own weight. Fuel consumption was extreme. One movement required resources. Germany no longer had. Every spare part was custom-made, meaning repairs took days, sometimes weeks. A breakdown wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Before these tanks could even reach combat, they had to be transported. That alone became a nightmare. Railway platforms buckled under their weight. Bridges were simply unusable. In some cases, tracks had to be reinforced just to move a single vehicle a few kilometers. Allied bombers targeted rail hubs relentlessly. Each destroyed track delayed deployment further. Some tanks never even left the factories. Others were unloaded miles from their intended positions and forced to crawl forward, slowly, painfully through forests and open fields. That was when nature attacked. European soil, especially in Eastern Europe, is deceptive. It looks solid until it rains. Then it becomes a trap. These massive tanks sank into the ground inch by inch. Tracks spun uselessly. Engines screamed. Crews watched helplessly as their unstoppable machine became immobile. German recovery vehicles were too weak to pull them free. Even multiple vehicles working together often failed. The tank wasn't destroyed. It was claimed. Inside the tank, conditions were brutal. Ventilation struggled to keep up with engine heat. In summer, temperatures became unbearable. In winter, condensation froze on metal walls. Crews lived with constant fear, not of enemy fire, but of mechanical failure. If the engine died in enemy territory, escape was unlikely. Imagine sitting inside the most powerful tank ever built, unable to move, unable to fight, waiting for orders that never come. For many crews, the war passed them by without a single battle. As reports of failures reached Berlin, Hitler refused to listen. He blamed commanders. He blamed mechanics. He blamed cowardice. He never blamed the design. To him, these tanks were symbols, proof that Germany was still superior, still destined to win. But symbols do not fight wars. Fuel shortages worsened. Factories were bombed daily. Experienced engineers were killed or captured. The dream of the secret tank was collapsing faster than the Reich itself. By late 1944, the situation was hopeless. Some tanks were hidden in forests and left behind. Others were destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. A few were seized intact by advancing Allied forces. When Allied engineers finally examined them, their conclusion was chilling. This machine was built for a war that no longer existed. Too slow, too heavy, too demanding. A technological giant, born too late. The Allies studied every bolt, every plate of armor. They respected the engineering. But they also saw the fatal flaw. A weapon must match its environment. Lighter tanks with better logistics won battles. Air superiority decided outcomes. Flexibility mattered more than raw power. Germany had chased perfection and lost reality. Most weapons are remembered for what they destroyed. This one is remembered for what it never did. No heroic charges. No last stands. No decisive victories. Just 13 silent giants, stopped by rain, snow, mud, and time. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, Europe was a graveyard of machines. Tanks rusted in fields. Aircraft lay shattered across runways. Weapons once built to dominate the world were now nothing more than scrap. But among these ruins were 13 machines that drew special attention. They had never fought. They had never proven themselves. Yet they represented one of the most extreme engineering experiments of the war. Germany's secret tanks had survived the war almost untouched, because they had never truly entered it. As Allied troops advanced into Germany and occupied former Nazi territories, reports began to surface. Massive tanks hidden in forests, buried under camouflage nets, abandoned beside destroyed rail lines. Soldiers stood beside them in disbelief. They were bigger than anything the Allies had ever fielded. Some tanks still had fuel, others still had ammunition, but none had a future. For Allied intelligence officers, these machines were not trophies. They were questions. The tanks were transported slowly and with difficulty to testing grounds. Engineers from the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union examined them piece by piece. They fired test rounds. They measured armor thickness. They studied engine performance. The verdict was unanimous. Yes, the armor was formidable. Yes, the gun was devastating. But the cost was absurd. Maintenance demands were extreme. Logistics were unrealistic. Mobility was dangerously limited. These tanks required perfect conditions, and war never provides perfection. After studying the German designs, the Allies made a crucial decision. They would never build anything like this. Instead, they invested in balance, firepower that was good enough, armor that was sufficient, mobility that was reliable, logistics that could function under chaos. The lesson was clear. A tank that cannot reach the battlefield is already defeated. The Soviet Union viewed the tanks differently. They admired the raw intimidation factor. They recognized the psychological impact of such a massive weapon. But even Soviet engineers, famous for building heavy armor, understood the flaw. Weight is not strength. Survivability comes from movement. Some concepts influenced later designs, but the extreme super-heavy philosophy was quietly abandoned. Most of the tanks met an unglamorous end. Cut apart for scrap, melted down to rebuild shattered cities, erased from the landscape. Only fragments survived: turrets, armor plates, engine parts, scattered across museums and military testing facilities. Of the 13, none returned to service. None became operational weapons. They faded into obscurity. History remembers what changes outcomes. The Tiger tank, the Sherman, the T-34. These machines shaped battles. Germany's secret tank shaped nothing. It arrived too late. It demanded too much. It trusted power over practicality. In a war of speed, air power, and supply chains, it was a relic before it even fought. Why did Germany build it at all? Desperation. As defeat became inevitable, Nazi leadership turned to fantasy. They believed one perfect weapon could erase years of mistakes. This belief was dangerous. It diverted resources. It delayed real solutions. It replaced strategy with hope. The secret tank was not just a machine. It was denial forged in steel. Modern militaries still study these failures. Even today, engineers debate the same questions. Bigger or faster? Heavier or more mobile? Stronger or more adaptable? The ghost of Germany's secret tank still whispers a warning. If a weapon cannot adapt to reality, reality will destroy it. Every war leaves behind legends. Some are written in victory. Others are written in failure. Germany's secret tank belongs to the second kind, not because it was weak, but because it misunderstood the nature of war itself. Throughout history, leaders have searched for the ultimate weapon, something so powerful it would end all resistance, something so advanced it would make strategy irrelevant. The Nazis believed they were close. They believed thicker armor meant invincibility. They believed bigger guns meant dominance. They believed fear alone could win wars. But war does not reward excess. It rewards balance. World War II proved a brutal truth. Wars are not won by the strongest machine. They are won by the machine that can be built in large numbers, can be repaired in the field, can move across real terrain, can survive bad weather, can operate with limited fuel. Germany's secret tank failed every one of these tests. It was not a weapon of war. It was a weapon of imagination. The tank designed to terrify the Allies never frightened a single enemy soldier. The tank designed to dominate battlefields never crossed one. The tank designed to change history became a footnote. And the most painful irony of all? Germany did not lose the war because it lacked powerful weapons. It lost the war because it chose the wrong kind of power. Even today, military planners study these failures carefully. Modern warfare has changed. Drones instead of super-heavy armor. Precision strikes instead of brute force. Speed and information instead of mass. Yet the temptation remains the same: bigger, stronger, more intimidating. And history keeps repeating its warning. When power becomes too heavy, it stops moving forward. This secret tank was more than metal and machinery. It was a symbol of desperation, a symbol of denial, a symbol of a regime trying to out-engineer its own mistakes. By the time it was ready, the war was already lost. Technology cannot fix broken strategy. Steel cannot replace leadership.